My dear children, today I will tell you about a legendary commander from the depths of history. Close your eyes and imagine. As we navigate through the dusty pages of time, we come across a man whose name has echoed through the centuries, haunting the nightmares of his enemies. Yes, that man is none other than Hannibal Barca, the pride of Carthage and the dread of Rome. Before we begin our story, take a deep breath and prepare yourself for this journey. Because this is not just the story of a warrior, it's an epic of a nation's rise and fall, the building of hopes and dreams, betrayal and courage, victory and agony intertwined. It is the tale of a legend written in the dust of caravan routes and the clash of swords and shields on both sides of the Mediterranean. To understand Hannibal's life, we must first get to know the land he was born and raised in, Carthage, a mighty maritime empire. This city-state founded by the Phoenicians shines like a jewel in the heart of the Mediterranean, in present-day Tunisia. Carthage was one of the most powerful cities of its time, with its wealth and control over trade routes. Its merchants traveled thousands of miles for incense and exotic spices, and its ships sailed to distant lands. But Carthage's real strength lay in its military might. And it is here that a young hero, Hannibal, first steps onto the stage of history. Imagine that, as a child, Hannibal grows up at his father Hamilcar Barca's side. His father, one of Carthage's most skilled generals, introduces Hannibal to Rome as the eternal enemy from an early age. Young Hannibal learns how to fight the Romans in his father's military camp, hears tales of victory, and the burning hatred and desire for revenge against Rome gradually envelops his spirit and body. One day, when Hannibal is just 10 years old, his father calls him to his side. He says, "Come here, my son. Kneel before this sacred altar and swear. Rome will be your enemy for as long as you draw breath." Hannibal does not hesitate in response to his father's words. Despite his young age, his eyes shine with the light of a warrior and a burning desire for revenge. He clasps his hands on his chest and swears an endless enmity against Rome from that moment on. Imagine that moment, dear friends. That little boy under the Carthaginian sun, who will become the commander that haunts a great empire, engraves every word of this oath into his mind. This is how Hannibal's legendary journey begins. The first steps of this man, who will instill fear in his enemies, change the course of history, and be remembered for his courage and genius, are taken like this. Now, let's take a sip of water and a deep breath, because the real story will begin with Hannibal's bloody struggle against Rome, the moment the eagle starts to show its claws. Are you ready? Then let's follow Hannibal's footsteps together and dive into the story of this great warrior who shaped the fate of Carthage. My dear friends, before we dive deeply into our story, we must understand the spirit of the lands where Hannibal was born. These lands are a place where seas and deserts, wealth and warfare intertwine. Carthage. Now close your eyes and take a journey to this ancient city lost in the mists of time. As the waves of the blue Mediterranean batter the shores, the walls of Carthage rise before your eyes. Birds soar in the sky, merchants bustle in the markets, ships come and go in the harbors. That harbor. The heart of Carthage, the source of its wealth and power. Markets overflowing with all sorts of scents, spices, incense, fabrics, and exotic fruits. And there, amidst this chaos, Hannibal's destiny begins to take shape. Carthage was founded about 3,000 years ago by the Phoenicians on what is now Tunisian soil. From the moment of its birth, this city, located at one of the most strategic points in the Mediterranean, grew rapidly and developed. The immigrants from Phoenicia's port city of Tyre sought new lands beyond the sea. Their sails stretched to distant shores, increasing their wealth through maritime trade. Carthage was born as the most important colony of Phoenicia in the west and quickly became a center of trade, wealth, and political power. However, this wealth also brought many enemies. Carthage's true rival was Rome, a city-state slowly gaining strength on the other side of Italy, on the banks of the Tiber River. The two powers would face off for control of the Mediterranean. Thus, the seeds of the First Punic War were sown. Imagine that the waters of the Mediterranean bore witness to fierce competition between Carthage's merchant ships and Rome's military fleets. This war, which lasted for decades, caused great losses on both sides. In the end, Carthage suffered a major defeat against Rome and was forced to make peace under harsh conditions. This defeat left deep wounds on the people of Carthage. The city lost its trade power, a large portion of its lands, and many valuable resources. Carthage had transformed from a once mighty sea power into a wounded lion. It was during this time that Hamilcar Barca, the great commander and father of Hannibal, stepped onto the stage. Ah, Hamilcar. The rebellious spirit of Carthage, the stubborn general who refused to accept defeat. After the Punic Wars, the fire of revenge burning in Hamilcar's heart blazed even more intensely. Hamilcar, who refused to bow to Rome, vowed to restore Carthage to its former glory. But Hamilcar would not carry out this war alone. He would do so alongside the young warrior he had raised, his son Hannibal. Imagine that while Hamilcar led small-scale resistances against Rome in Sardinia and Corsica, he also set his sights on the rich lands of Iberia. According to him, Carthage needed new resources and new territories to regain its strength. Iberia, or present-day Spain, was tailor-made for this purpose. Hamilcar set out towards the Iberian Peninsula with his family and most loyal soldiers. Young Hannibal accompanied his father on this journey. Hamilcar established Carthage's new base in Iberia and began to gather an army by forging alliances with local tribes. In Iberia, he strengthened Carthage's weakening muscles through warfare. However, Hamilcar always had one goal in mind: to rise against Rome once more and seek revenge. He continuously told Hannibal from a young age why Rome was the enemy and what a threat they posed. And one day, as the sun set in Iberia, Hamilcar turned to little Hannibal and made him swear again, "You will never make peace with Rome, my son. You will fight them for the rest of your life." But Hamilcar's plans against Rome were left incomplete. When the time came, Hamilcar unexpectedly lost his life. Some say he died on the battlefield, others that he was betrayed and killed. Regardless of the manner, Hamilcar's death was a great blow to Carthage. But for Hannibal, his father's death only fueled his anger further. The task of fulfilling his father's dreams now fell to him. And so Hannibal, who would echo through the history of Carthage and become the terror of Rome, was preparing to step onto the stage. His father's legacy was not a burden but a guide on his shoulders. This young man, burning with the fire of revenge, would set out to complete his father's unfinished business. Carthage's brave warrior, Hannibal, was about to embark on a long and arduous journey from the mountains of Iberia to Rome. Are you ready, my dear friends? Because our story is just beginning. Hannibal's war against Rome would become one of the most epic and unforgettable struggles in world history. But that's the start of another story. Soon I will tell you about Hannibal's rise to command armies at a young age and his preparations against Rome. Get ready, the adventure is just beginning. Ah, dear friends, come a little closer. Now, I'm going to tell you the beginning of the great Hannibal story. This is not just the tale of a warrior, but also of a man, a father, a son, and how one city's fate was changed forever. Close your eyes, feel the fire in your heart, and go back to the day Hannibal was born in the shadows of history. Our story begins in the narrow, bustling streets of Carthage, at a moment echoing with deep sighs, great hopes, and even greater anger. Hannibal was born in 247 BC, in the shadow of Carthage's walls overlooking the deep blue waters of the Mediterranean. His father, Hamilcar Barca, was Rome's greatest enemy at the time and Carthage's bravest general. He was a man dedicated to strengthening Carthage against Rome. And now he was celebrating the birth of a new son. But there was a dark shadow in this joy. Hamilcar knew he would raise his son to one day fight against Rome. When Hannibal was born, a deep determination shone in Hamilcar's eyes. He knew this child was no ordinary boy. Even as a baby, there was a fire, a defiance in Hannibal's eyes. And Hamilcar was determined to unleash this fire against Rome. When Hannibal was still just a child, his father took him in his arms and looked out towards the distant lands of Rome. "My son," Hamilcar said, "your destiny will not be written here, but far away in the lands of Rome it will be written with blood, fire, and courage." And at that moment, little Hannibal saw Rome's enmity in his father's eyes, felt its cold breath on his neck. Hamilcar knew that Hannibal was destined to come into this world as a soldier, a leader. That's why he meticulously planned his son's upbringing. Even as a child, Hannibal was dedicated to the gods by his father and sworn to fight against Rome. Yes, that famous oath. When Hannibal was still a little boy, Hamilcar took him to a sacred temple. In the presence of the gods in the temple, Hannibal knelt at his father's feet. In his father's arms, in the hands of one of Carthage's bravest commanders, Hannibal declared his hatred and allegiance against Rome. With his father's fire in his eyes and the vengeance of Carthage in his heart, Hamilcar leaned in and whispered softly to his son, "You will never make peace with Rome, Hannibal. Never, my son, never." Hamilcar's oath was etched into Hannibal's soul. At a young age, he began to burn with a desire for vengeance against Rome. This oath became the cornerstone of Hannibal's future. He was raised like a soldier under his father's watchful eye. Hamilcar introduced him to maritime knowledge at Carthage's ports and taught him military tactics from a young age. Hannibal learned the scent of the seas, the sound of the wind, and the rhythm of battle from his childhood. In Carthage's narrow streets and sandy squares, Hannibal played not with other children, but with his father's soldiers, training with them, learning archery and swordsmanship. Every movement had his father's shadow. Hamilcar raised his son as if he were the shadow of Rome, tough, harsh, but equally determined. Young Hannibal's training was never easy. His father acclimated him to tough conditions from a young age. Back then, in the mountains of Carthage, Hamilcar would leave Hannibal in the forests to learn survival. Hunger, thirst, cold, and exhaustion. These difficulties became his closest companions. Hannibal grew up in Carthage's harsh climate, under the winds of the Mediterranean and his father's strict discipline. Every moment, every breath was a preparation for war. His father constantly told him, "Rome will always crush the strong, but we will not submit to them. We will fight them. One day you will become Carthage's leader and stand up against Rome." But Hannibal's training was not just physical preparation. Hamilcar also trained him as a great strategist. In the evenings by the campfire, Hamilcar would tell Hannibal about past battles, tactics, and Rome's military strategies. Hannibal listened to his father's every word with great attention, absorbing everything he heard. Young Hannibal was a beacon of hope for Carthage's future, and his father raised him with this in mind. However, Hannibal's training continued even after Hamilcar's death. When his father died, Hannibal was still a young man. But the training he had received up until then prepared him for his future role. When he heard the news of his father's death, Hannibal felt a great void and a deep anger in his heart. But Hannibal never forgot what he learned under his father's shadow. He would turn his father's legacy into a war of vengeance against Rome for the freedom of Carthage. And so, dear friends, the story of Hannibal begins. A life filled with oaths, losses, and grand dreams led him on a journey that would make him Rome's greatest nightmare. The training and oaths Hannibal received at a young age became the elements that shaped his entire life. Now, together with you, we'll start following Hannibal's first steps, his struggle against Rome, and the decisions he made along the way. This story is just beginning, dear friends, because Hannibal's anger and courage were so great that they would shake one of history's greatest empires. My friends. Now, let me take you to the lands that changed Carthage's fate, Hispania. This was the place where Hannibal, as a young commander, first stepped foot and began carving his name into the annals of history. Hispania. Once ruled by barbarians, these lands were now starting to be shaped by Hannibal's clever plans and shrewd strategies. Hannibal was in the spring of his youth. After his father's death, he was brave enough to take on the leadership of Carthage. When he arrived in Hispania, he inherited the legacy of his father, Hamilcar Barca. He had grown up with his father's strict discipline. He was resilient to pain, hunger, cold, and war. But here, in Hispania, Hannibal faced not just enemy armies, but also a major challenge that would determine the future of Carthage. Because Hispania was a land where Rome's eyes were fixed, and the balance of power was constantly shifting. Under Hannibal's leadership, Carthage's dominance in Hispania was revived. These lands were of great importance both for their rich resources and their strategic position. Hannibal meticulously roamed the plains and mountains of Hispania, seizing every opportunity to understand the spirit of these lands. To him, every stone, every tree in Hispania could be an ally in Carthage's fight against Rome. And Hannibal wanted to win over the people of Hispania to his cause. Gaining the love and loyalty of the people was as important as any weapon. He knew that winning a people's heart was even harder than conquering the strongest fortresses. Hannibal began to build friendships with the local people of Hispania. He learned their cultures, languages, and customs. He shared bread with them at the same table. He earned their trust, approaching them with Carthage's friendship and peaceful intentions. Hannibal treated the tribal leaders of Hispania kindly. He promised them freedom and honor. My friends, these promises were as effective as a sword on the battlefield. Hannibal's charisma, leadership, and determination quickly won the hearts of the Hispania people. His name even began to inspire respect among his enemies. But Hannibal's goal wasn't just to hold on to Hispania. He intended to build an army here, equip it with the best soldiers, and strike Rome like a storm. That's why he decided to establish a base in Hispania. He wanted to gather the necessary strength for a major attack on Rome. Hispania became the center of Carthage's strategic plans. Following his father Hamilcar's plans, Hannibal strengthened Carthage's presence in Hispania. He aimed to build an army strong enough to bend Rome's will. Carthage's new strategy was to build up strength in Hispania and prepare for war against Rome. Hannibal used Hispania's resources to strengthen his army. He recruited new soldiers, produced weapons, and prepared for war against Rome day by day. He focused all his attention on Hispania to strike a heavy blow to Rome. He made all his preparations in secrecy. His plans were so clever and mysterious that Rome couldn't quite figure out what was coming. To them, Hannibal was just building up power in Hispania. But in reality, Hannibal had a grand plan in mind, a plan to strike Rome at its heart. During his time in Hispania, Hannibal made his army disciplined and strong. He taught his soldiers new tactics every day, instilled resilience and courage in them. He ensured they were ready for battle not only physically but also mentally. He tried to instill in each soldier the anger against Rome and the determination for Carthage's freedom. Hannibal knew that war was not just a battlefield fight but also a battle of wills. And he believed that in this war, the one who was mentally strong would win. But, dear friends, in this process Hannibal not only learned about his soldiers but also about Rome's weaknesses. He analyzed their arrogance, vulnerabilities, and how they felt secure. Hannibal's gaze was always on Rome, but his mind was deep in Hispania. He was like a storm brewing in Hispania. He was patiently preparing for a great battle. The winds of Hispania were blowing in his favor. He was planning every step of the war on this land. And so, my friends, Hannibal's time in Hispania was not just about a leader's rise, but also about the story of a people fighting for their freedom. The voice of Hannibal rising from the mountains of Hispania reached the walls of Rome. That voice was the sound of a leader challenging Rome, a man sworn to fight for the freedom of his people. And that voice echoed through the depths of history. Hannibal's days in Hispania were the days when a leader rose not only as a warrior but also as a hero in the hearts of his people. The lands of Hispania witnessed his preparations against Rome. As Carthage's new strategy took shape, the struggle against Rome was getting closer every day. Ah, dear friends, this story doesn't end here. Hannibal's adventures in Hispania were just the beginning of his grand plans against Rome. Now even greater events awaited to make Rome tremble. Ah, my friends, let me now take you to one of the unforgettable moments in history where Hannibal's courage and cunning once again took center stage. The siege of Saguntum. Ah, this siege was not just about capturing a city, it was the spark of a great war. A spark tossed by the harsh winds of Spain was about to strike Rome's proud walls like a fireball. Saguntum was where Rome challenged Carthage. At that time, this small city in southeastern Hispania was strategically chosen by Rome to strengthen its alliances against Carthage. Oh, Saguntum! It was a treacherous pawn in Rome's hands against Carthage. And Hannibal knew very well that this pawn had to be taken from Rome's grasp. He was a stubborn and ambitious man, but also a sharp strategist. Hannibal chose Saguntum as the place to deliver the first blow. He planned to strike right in the heart of Rome, because this city symbolized Rome's intentions against Carthage. Ah, let me tell you, as a wise one, this wasn't just a city siege. When Hannibal moved to capture Saguntum, he was declaring an open war against Rome. Hannibal gathered his troops, armed them, and began advancing towards Saguntum. As he approached the city gates, the people of Saguntum trembled at the news that this dreadful general was at their doors, because Hannibal's name was associated with fear and terror. But Hannibal was not just a purveyor of fear, he was also a great military genius. He knew that a war wasn't won just with sword and shield, but also with intelligence and patience. Hannibal set up camp at the base of Saguntum's walls. He and his soldiers began to examine the city's weak points. Meanwhile, the people of Saguntum were waiting for help from Rome. But Hannibal knew something very well: Rome wouldn't be able to come to Saguntum's aid. Rome didn't yet realize how far Hannibal was willing to go. Hannibal started the siege. Months of siege. Ah, my friends, it wasn't easy. Hannibal and his army battled hunger, disease, and the city's formidable walls. But Hannibal never gave up. He waited with patience and steadfastness. He was like a hunter waiting for the right moment to strike. As the city's people waited in fear behind their gates, Hannibal was reshaping his army. This war was also going to be a lesson for his soldiers. He was teaching them the art of siege, waiting, and patience. Hannibal spent day and night in his tent, working on maps, calculating every possibility. For him, this siege was the first step towards Rome's heart, and he was determined to cross this path no matter the cost. But my friends, Hannibal's patience and determination eventually paid off. In the 8th month of the siege, Saguntum's strength was exhausted. Hunger and fear had crept into the city's walls. The expected help from Rome never arrived, just as Hannibal had predicted. And Hannibal sensed that the moment he had been waiting for to deliver the final blow had come. Like a great storm, he led his army towards the city's walls. As arrows flew through the air, Hannibal's soldiers climbed the walls. While the city's people fled in terror, Hannibal's army entered. Saguntum fell. And my friends, with this victory, Hannibal's name grew even larger. But the impact of this victory wasn't confined to the narrow streets of Saguntum. Rome had realized Hannibal's true intentions and courage with this siege, because this was the first step of the great war declared against Rome. Hannibal had not only captured Saguntum but had also shattered Rome's pride. The fall of Saguntum sent a powerful message to Rome: Hannibal was coming. And my friends, this message was whispered through the streets of Rome, among the people. Hannibal's name echoed in the heart of Rome and became a fearsome legend. Hannibal's victory shook Rome. The siege of Saguntum was the beginning of Hannibal's grand war plan. He took the first step on the road to Rome's heart. But dear friends, this was just the beginning, because Hannibal was aware of the great war ahead. And this war would continue until Rome was brought to its knees. Ah, my dear friends. Now let me take you to one of history's greatest challenges, the great journey where Hannibal boldly challenged Rome with all his might, a journey marked by impossible in history, but achieved through his courage and cunning. Yes, that long, arduous, and legendary march to the heart of Rome. After capturing Saguntum, Hannibal rallied his army under Carthage's war cries and openly defied Rome. But my wise friends, Hannibal was no ordinary commander. He was a patient and determined hunter, watching his prey with the eyes of an eagle. He was shaping his grand plan in his mind to bring Rome to its knees. And this plan involved an unexpected route, a journey by land from Spain, crossing the Alps, and reaching Italy instead of going by sea. Ah, in Hannibal's eyes, the shortest path to Rome was also the most challenging. But Hannibal was not one to shy away from difficulties. On the contrary, he took great pleasure in challenging hardships and daring the impossible. He made his decision and commanded his soldiers, "We will march into the heart of Rome, through the impossible." This grand journey began from the southern coast of Spain. Hannibal set out with his army from Carthage for a long and arduous march towards Rome. On one side, countless soldiers, and on the other, an army of heavy war elephants. Ah, these elephants, my dear friends, were not just the power of war, but also colossal creatures that instilled fear in the enemy's heart. At the head of this army was Hannibal. His courage and leadership were his army's greatest weapon. The army, leaving Carthage first, had to traverse the mountainous terrain of Hispania. Conflicts with enemy tribes, hunger, disease. But Hannibal paid no attention to these difficulties. His mind was set on one goal: Rome. With every step, every pass, every conflict, Hannibal's thoughts wandered through the streets of Rome. For many soldiers, this march felt like a journey to death. But Hannibal's determination and courage convinced them of victory. With each step, they grew stronger. With each hardship, they grew bigger. And finally, my friends, when Hannibal and his army reached the foothills of the Alps, the real test began. On a route that even Rome could not conceive, Hannibal saw these towering mountains not as an obstacle but as the key to victory. The Alps had kept Rome's great armies away. Rome was mistaken in the security provided by such well-protected northern borders. But Hannibal knew that behind these mountains lay a victory that would shake the heart of Rome. Ah, these mountains, my friends, famous for their snow-capped peaks, storms, and bone-chilling cold. Hannibal was about to face perhaps the toughest test in history here. Slowly, the army began climbing the high mountains. High altitude, cold weather, hunger, and disease. All these were like enemies united against Hannibal's soldiers. But Hannibal did not give up. Every morning he gave motivational speeches to his troops, encouraging them to take pride in being part of this journey. But with every advancement, the challenges increased. Some soldiers, exhausted, thought of turning back. But Hannibal's voice echoed against the cold alpine winds: "Friends, Rome is beyond these mountains. Victory awaits us." However, my friends, Hannibal's challenges were not limited to nature. Along the way, they encountered enemy tribes. These tribes ambushed Hannibal's army, setting traps. But Hannibal used all his intelligence to read their minds and outsmart their traps. As he led his army through the dangerous Alpine passes, he made unexpected moves to surprise his enemies. And finally, despite great difficulty, Hannibal and his army reached the summit of the Alps. But the greatest challenge was now beginning: the descent. Going down those steep slopes was much more dangerous than climbing up. Rocks, ice, and freezing cold. But Hannibal managed to keep his army together. Even the war elephants moved with fear during this treacherous descent. But Hannibal kept his eyes on Rome. And finally, when they reached the other side of the Alps, Hannibal's army had survived and passed a grueling test. They had come right to Rome's doorstep. Hannibal's victory, my dear friends, was not just a military success, it was a testament to human will and determination. For him, there was no such thing as impossible, there were only challenges to overcome. And Hannibal, the man who defied Rome, left his mark on history with his courage and resolve. On the peaks of the Alps, under the shadow of Rome, Hannibal claimed victory at his first step. But my friends, this was just the beginning. In the lands of Italy, even greater and tougher challenges awaited Hannibal. But now, let us all celebrate the beginning of this great warrior's story, filled with victory as he marched towards the heart of Rome. Hannibal would bring Rome to its knees beyond the Alps. But that was the beginning of another story. My dear friends, the next story I'm going to tell you as a sage is about Hannibal's brilliance and bravery in battling Rome's mighty armies and making a name for himself on the battlefield. Yes, I'm talking about the battles of Ticinus and Trebia. These two clashes marked the first moments when Hannibal challenged Rome and shattered the pride of the Roman army. Now gather around the fire and close your eyes. Imagine Hannibal's legendary moments on the battlefield one by one. After descending the challenging passes of the Alps, Hannibal's army stepped onto Roman soil. The Carthaginian commander who dared to challenge Rome had now reached its doorstep. But Rome wasn't idle, my dear friends. Consul Publius Cornelius Scipio, a brave leader, quickly mobilized and positioned his army against Hannibal. The first battle was set to take place in northern Italy, on the banks of the Po River, in the Ticinus plain. These lands were new to Hannibal but quite familiar to the Roman army. Hannibal's skills in warfare, strategy, and perhaps most importantly, his ability to read the enemy, were about to be tested here. On the Ticinus plain, both armies were observing each other. On a cold morning, Hannibal moved his army into action. He sent his cavalry forward for reconnaissance. These cavalry units were tasked with surprising the Romans and drawing them into a quick skirmish. My dear friends, Hannibal's plan was simple but clever. The Romans faced an unexpected attack. The cavalry units lured the Romans into an ambush and then quickly withdrew, forcing the Romans to chase them. And in that moment, my friends, Hannibal's brilliance shone. Rome's consul Scipio had walked into a trap. Seeing the Roman cavalry advance, Hannibal had prepared a large part of his army and was waiting for the enemy. Hannibal's Gallic and Numidian cavalry surrounded the Romans from the flanks. The Romans, in shock and panic, tried to retreat, but it was too late. Scipio barely escaped the battlefield wounded. And so the clash on the Ticinus plain was more than a small defeat for the Romans, it was the first real test of Hannibal's genius. But this was just the beginning. Hannibal's ambition and thirst for victory had already shaken the Roman soldiers, but a bigger challenge was awaiting him. Then, my dear friends, it was time for Trebia. Hannibal's eyes were shining because his victory at Ticinus had given him great confidence. The Carthaginian army was positioned along the Trebia River. Roman consuls Sempronius and Scipio were making major preparations to face Hannibal. But Hannibal was predicting their every move, navigating their minds. On a cold and misty morning, Hannibal put his plan into action. Hannibal stationed part of his army in a hidden location across the Trebia River. But his most clever move was yet to come, my dear friends. Hannibal wanted to break the morale and physical endurance of the Romans by forcing them to cross the freezing waters of the river. When he saw the Romans on the other side of the river, he launched a small force to attack. This force was sent to provoke the Romans and then quickly retreated. Ah, my friends, Sempronius fell for the provocation. At that moment, as Hannibal had expected, he dragged the Roman army into the cold and dark waters of the river. As the Roman army crossed the Trebia River, they were shivering from the icy water. Their armor became heavy, and the cold slowed them down. And at that moment, Hannibal's trap was set. Hannibal moved his ambushing troops on the other side of the Trebia into action. The Roman army was split right down the middle. Hannibal's cavalry charged at the Romans like an arrow. The Roman soldiers, in shock and fear, didn't know what hit them as the Carthaginian cavalry surrounded them. In the freezing waters of the river, they struggled to fight amidst a mix of fear and chaos, but Hannibal's plan was working flawlessly. The Romans tasted Hannibal's military genius once again that day. The Battle of Trebia ended in a major Carthaginian victory. Hannibal had cleverly lured the enemy into a trap and defeated them on his chosen battlefield. This victory was not just a battlefield win, it also shattered Rome's military pride and morale. As Hannibal advanced through Italy, every victory struck fear into the hearts of both Romans and their allies. Ah, my friends, the battles of Ticinus and Trebia. These two battles were the first steps of Hannibal's great campaign against Rome. His genius and leadership combined with the courage and intelligence that even Rome hadn't anticipated. This story isn't over. There were greater challenges and more epic battles in Hannibal's journey to victory. But these victories marked the beginning of his legend in Italy. In the next major battle, we'll see how Hannibal once again made his mark on history. Are you ready, my dear friends? Because there's still so much more to tell in this story. Ah, my dear friends. Now let me tell you about another great victory of Hannibal, who left his mark on the dusty pages of history and wrote epics on the battlefield. This story is about how one of Rome's most powerful armies fell into a terrible trap on the misty shores of Lake Trasimene. Come a little closer, warm up by the fire, and close your eyes. For I will take you to the dark waters of Lake Trasimene, the mysterious shadows of the forest, and one of history's bloodiest ambushes. When Hannibal descended from the freezing cold and challenging passes of the Alps and entered Italy, he continued advancing towards the heart of Rome. After the great victory at Trebia, Roman morale had been shattered. But the Romans were not a people to give up easily. A new army was raised, led by a young and ambitious consul named Flaminius. Flaminius was determined to stop Hannibal's advance and restore Rome's honor. But oh my friends, Hannibal had already figured out Rome. He knew the ambition and impatience in Flaminius's soul, and he planned to exploit these weaknesses. Hannibal patiently waited to lure the Roman army into a trap. He positioned himself around Lake Trasimene. The lake's shores were surrounded by narrow passes and forests. It looked like an ideal campsite, but was actually the beginning of Hannibal's cunning trap. On the hills overlooking the lake, he secretly positioned his troops among the trees. Yes, my friends, this trap was so clever that the Roman army would unwittingly find themselves walking straight into Hannibal's grasp. Early in the morning, the weather was cold and foggy. The lake's surface was covered with a thin layer of mist, and everything looked quiet and serene. Flaminius quickly moved toward Hannibal's camp, perhaps sensing victory in the air. But Hannibal was waiting in the cold of that morning. His army was silently positioned, eyes fixed on the advancing Roman forces. And then the moment came. My friends, the Romans began to advance through the narrow pass. Visibility was limited, everything was uncertain. But that was exactly Hannibal's plan. As Flaminius and his army advanced into the pass, Hannibal gave the signal. At that moment a war cry rose from the forests, and thousands of Carthaginian soldiers began pouring down from the hills like a rainstorm upon the Romans. The Roman army was completely caught off guard. It was as if the sky darkened, my friends, as if nature itself was helping Hannibal. At that moment, the Romans were engulfed in chaos, unable to understand what was happening. The sounds of spears from the forest, swords clashing against shields, and terrifying cries filled the air. Ah, my dear friends, this was one of the rare moments when Hannibal's genius shone brilliantly. His troops surrounded the Romans from both sides, leaving them no place to retreat. They were pushed into the cold and deep waters of the lake. Carthaginian cavalry blocked their escape routes and trapped the Roman army like prey. The panic and chaos were so immense that Flaminius's command structure completely broke down. Hannibal's soldiers pushed back the Romans in fierce hand-to-hand combat. Hannibal shattered the spirit and the army of Rome on the shores of Lake Trasimene. This battle was not just a military defeat for the Romans, it was also a psychological blow. The Roman people began to whisper Hannibal's name as a legend and a source of fear. But my dear friends, this was just another step in Hannibal's journey of great victories. The tremendous win at Trasimene had taken his war against Rome to a new level. Rome took Hannibal seriously now, but every step had to be more cautious and careful. For Hannibal's genius and leadership awaited them with new tactics and traps every time. Ah, my friends, this story doesn't end here. Hannibal's victorious campaign and the challenges that shook Rome were just beginning. His genius on the battlefield and strategic intelligence were impressing both his allies and enemies. Bigger battles, bloodier clashes, and more astonishing victories awaited Hannibal on this journey. Are you ready, my dear friends? Because we'll continue to follow Hannibal's steps toward the next great battle. Ah, my dear friends, once again let us embark on a journey into the depths of history to witness the triumph of a colossal hero. This time I will take you to one of the greatest battles of the ancient world, the Battle of Cannae. Here you will see how a strategic genius, a military leader, achieved a legendary victory and defeated his enemies with remarkable skill. Gather around the fire and get ready to experience this monumental moment in history together. Imagine in 216 BC, the sound of war instruments and weapons echoing under the sun, as Rome's greatest army assembled to engage in a fierce struggle against Hannibal's Carthaginian forces. The massive Roman army, commanded by one of Rome's greatest consuls, Lucius Aemilius Paulus, and Gaius Terentius Varro, was prepared to end Hannibal's rebellion and halt Carthage's dominance. But my friends, they were unaware of how Hannibal's brilliant strategies would surprise this grand army. Now close your eyes and imagine yourself on the battlefield. Cannae was a city set on a wide plain in the heart of Rome. Hannibal had chosen this area to draw the enemy in and strike a decisive blow at the most opportune moment. The Roman army was trapped in a narrow valley surrounded on both sides by expansive forests. Hannibal planned to use these natural barriers as an advantage against his foes. He had created a series of narrow and weak points at the front and set a trap with hidden Carthaginian soldiers in the shadows behind. For an enemy unaware of what lay behind these forests and narrow passes, it was almost a tomb. The first move in this grand battle at Cannae began with Hannibal's masterful maneuver to draw the enemy in. The Roman army, deceived by Hannibal's feigned retreat, believed he was withdrawing and was vulnerable. Generals Paulus and Varro, leading the Roman forces, took action to completely destroy Hannibal. However, my friends, this was where the real game began. Hannibal's entire plan was to lure the Roman army in, trap them, and deliver a massive blow. Hannibal strategically positioned himself to compress the numerically superior Roman army in the narrow valley and create a large battlefield. The Roman forces became so constrained by the ferocity of the battle that every movement played into Hannibal's plan. The Carthaginians surrounded the Romans on both sides in the midst of the battle, portraying the Roman soldiers as trapped whales. The enemy's ranks began to disintegrate in a state of great panic. Hannibal's strategy of encircling and crushing the enemy became one of the most memorable tactical maneuvers in history. As the battle progressed, Hannibal's tactics were fully executed. The Carthaginians had surrounded the Roman army, leaving them not only defenseless but also with no chance to escape. The shadows of the forest and the smoke from the conflict seemed to merge, completely encircling the Roman forces and leaving them vulnerable. The Roman soldiers had effectively trapped themselves and fell victim to Hannibal's ingenious plans. The monumental victory at Cannae was a summary of Hannibal's military genius, strategic intelligence, and leadership skills. Hannibal met Rome with one of its greatest defeats in history. This victory not only crushed the Roman military, but also dealt a severe blow to Roman morale. The Roman people experienced a deep shock after this great defeat, leading to questions about the power of the Roman army. My dear friends, this victory was not just a turning point in Hannibal's military career, but also one of the greatest blows in the military history of the Roman Empire. Cannae became a challenge where Hannibal's name was inscribed in history with golden letters, achieving a tremendous victory through an ingenious strategy by drawing his enemies into a trap. But you must know, this victory also heralded new battles and other great struggles in Hannibal's historical journey. In the depths of battlefields and the dark corners of history, we will continue to recount Hannibal's impressive journey and military genius. Are you ready, my dear friends? Because the journey of this legendary soldier is far from over. My dear friends, let us take another step into the depths of history, delving into tales of victories and strategies. Today I will tell you about another crucial turning point in Hannibal's journey to victory during this great historical era, the capture of Capua and the shift in strategic balance in Italy. How could the fall of a single city in the ancient world of wars and great heroes create such widespread effects? Let us explore this question together. Imagine that in the heart of Rome, the impressive city of Capua stood out as one of Rome's most important and wealthy cities. Located in southern Italy, Capua was a symbol of Rome's dominance with its fertile lands, rich cultural life, and strategic position. But my dear friends, to understand how Hannibal's war strategy shaped the fall of one of Rome's proud cities, we need to embark on a journey. The capture of Capua was another example of Hannibal's strategic genius. After the great victory at Cannae, Hannibal's armies moved to undermine Rome's military superiority in Italy and to reach Rome's allied cities. Capua was at the center of this strategy. Hannibal had devised a grand plan to capture this important city, aiming to profoundly shake Rome's strategic balance. Hannibal's strategy for capturing Capua involved not just military superiority but also psychological warfare. Following his victory at Cannae, where Rome had suffered a massive blow, Hannibal sought to make a significant impact on this city as well. By targeting Capua, he planned to both demoralize Rome and attract its allies to his side. He aimed to capture the city by besieging it and seizing its powerful allies and military resources. When besieging Capua, Hannibal developed an effective strategy. He established a tight siege around the city walls, forcing the enemy to remain inside. The city's inhabitants, in fear and despair, found Hannibal's siege increasingly unbearable. Hannibal's strategy demonstrated how even cities once considered powerful allies of Rome could easily fall. The fall of Capua exposed the weakness of the Roman Empire and highlighted Hannibal's military genius to the world. After the capture of Capua, Hannibal significantly altered the strategic balance in Italy. The fall of the city severely shook Rome's power and morale. Among Rome's allies, great uncertainty and fear spread. During this period, Hannibal made significant efforts to gain the support of Rome's allied cities. The capture of Capua was a reflection of Hannibal's war strategies and military skills. Hannibal succeeded in breaking Rome's resistance by skillfully applying both his military power and psychological warfare strategies. My dear friends, the capture of Capua represents a turning point in Hannibal's military career. The fall of a city demonstrated how effectively a military leader's strategic genius and determination could be used. This event also led to Rome losing its self-confidence and facing significant challenges against its enemies. The capture of Capua secured its place as another important victory in the depths of history, further proving the magnitude of Hannibal's success in military history. My dear friends, after the capture of Capua, the balance in Italy shifted, shaping the future of the war. Hannibal's grand strategic move shook Rome's dominance and influenced the course of history. Now, as we delve deeper into the journey and victories of this great leader, we will gain a deeper understanding of Hannibal's subsequent struggles. Are you ready, my dear friends? Because we will continue to explore the depths of these great historical battles. My dear friends, we are embarking on another turning point in this fascinating corner of history. Now I will take you on a deep exploration of Rome's victories in Spain and the rise of one of the key figures behind these victories, Scipio Africanus. After the tremendous successes of Hannibal, once the enemy's dreaded nightmare, we will examine the events of Rome's counterattack and their impact on history. Let's witness this grand struggle of history and discover how Rome regained its strength and how Scipio Africanus shone like a star. Hannibal's victories in Capua and other cities had shaken Rome, weakening its cities, allies, and morale significantly. However, as in every historical turning point, Rome's courageous leaders continued to seek light during these dark days. At this juncture, the military and strategic genius that Rome needed once again emerged. This person would come to be recognized as one of history's greatest commanders, Scipio Africanus. Rome had suffered significant losses against Hannibal and needed to reassess its military strategies. During this period, one of Rome's greatest achievements was its victories in Spain. Spain was a region of great strategic importance for Carthage and held a significant place as part of Hannibal's military operations. Rome's victories in this region represented not only military superiority but also a moral and strategic resurgence. Scipio Africanus was a pivotal figure in Rome's military history. Noted for his military skills and leadership qualities at a young age, Scipio emerged prominently in the military operations against Carthage in Spain. His military strategies introduced innovation and distinction compared to Hannibal's tactics. The young commander succeeded in breaking Carthage's influence in Spain, surpassing the strategies previously employed by Hannibal. Under Scipio's leadership, Rome achieved successes in Spain and significantly weakened Carthage's power in the region. The victories in Spain demonstrated that Rome had regained not only its military power but also its moral and strategic superiority. Scipio's successes allowed Rome to strengthen itself and respond more effectively against Hannibal. However, Scipio's rise was not limited to military successes. His intelligence and leadership skills drew the attention of all military and political circles in Rome. His innovative strategies balanced Hannibal's military genius and helped Rome alter the course of the war. Scipio's achievements set the stage for Rome to reassess its military and strategic capabilities and change the outcome of the war. My dear friends, Rome's victories in Spain and the rise of Scipio Africanus symbolize a rebirth in this important period of history. After Hannibal's great successes and Rome's dark days, Scipio's leadership and Rome's military strategies fundamentally altered the course of the war. These events illustrate historical turning points and how military genius is shaped. Now let's continue to explore how Rome developed its strategy against Hannibal after these great victories, and how the ultimate outcome of the war was shaped. Are you ready, my dear friends, to take another great step into the depths of history? Because we are approaching the end of Scipio's and Rome's monumental struggle, and a grand finale awaits us. My dear friends, few battles in history signify such a monumental turning point. Now I will tell you about the Battle of Zama, the greatest threat Hannibal faced. This battle stands as one of the final points in the grand struggle between Rome and Carthage. And after this intense struggle, we will explore the dramatic transformation Hannibal experienced and how Rome's pressure shaped his fate. Imagine the great commander who once crossed the Alps to reach the heart of Rome is now preparing for one final battle on the hot sands of Zama. In 202 BC, a major battle was about to erupt on the dusty terrain of the Zama Desert, a battle that would determine the fate of Carthage and Rome. Facing Hannibal was Rome's military genius, Scipio Africanus, and this battle would become a clash where both sides would showcase their highest levels of military strategy. The Battle of Zama marked a turning point, signaling the nearing end of the long war between Carthage and Rome. This battle became an arena where Hannibal's greatest strategic skills would be tested. The vast expanse of Zama provided a stage for both sides to display their tactical abilities. However, Hannibal now faced not only Rome's military might but also Scipio's strategic brilliance. Scipio Africanus's military strategies introduced a new level of intelligence and innovation that went beyond Hannibal's previous successes. The tactics developed by Scipio, suited to Rome's battle order, neutralized Hannibal's superior techniques. Observing how Hannibal's elephants struggled against Rome's smaller but disciplined forces profoundly altered the course of the Battle of Zama. Scipio effectively used Rome's military strength to neutralize Hannibal's advantages. In the end, Rome's victory was not only a military success but also a turning point that left deep marks on Hannibal's life. The Battle of Zama broke Carthage's resistance against Rome, resulting in a significant defeat and ultimately bringing an end to the war. Hannibal, once the shining star of the battlefield, now bore the heavy burden of defeat. After Zama, Hannibal's life underwent a major transformation. Carthage was shaken by this great defeat, and Hannibal had to return and become active again in the political arena of Carthage. However, Rome's pressures reshaped Hannibal's life and Carthage's fate. Rome continued to view Hannibal as a threat and developed various strategies to neutralize this great commander. Upon returning to Carthage, Hannibal, far from his former glory, tried to help his country recover through political and military reforms. Yet, Rome's continuous pressures and threats made this resurgence process extremely challenging for Hannibal. Rome kept a close watch on Hannibal's movements, trying to prevent him from regaining power. Consequently, Hannibal went through a difficult phase under the pressures of Rome and Carthage. Finally, Hannibal's exile completed his mark in history. With the intensification of Rome's pressures, Hannibal was forced to leave Carthage. This marked the fall of one of history's great commanders, and his final years were spent far from his former glories. Hannibal's period of exile reveals how tragic and challenging the last years of one of history's greatest military geniuses could be. My dear friends, sometimes even the greatest heroes fade from the stage of history. In this segment, we will embark on a deep journey into Hannibal's final battles in Bithynia and the tragic end that followed. We will explore how Hannibal's death and legacy impacted his struggles against Rome and left a lasting mark. Hannibal's life is remembered as a reflection of his immense military genius and strategic acumen. However, after the Battle of Zama and following defeats, his life underwent a transformation. The Romans, believing Hannibal still posed a threat, kept him under constant surveillance to neutralize him. Hannibal had to continue his life with a strategy of escape to avoid Roman detection. After the end of the Carthaginian Wars, he was far removed from his former glory. Nevertheless, he made efforts to resist Rome's dominance in Europe through new battles and negotiations, maintaining his skills and wisdom. Once a renowned commander, Hannibal began operating under the rule of the Kingdom of Bithynia. Bithynia, located in northwestern Anatolia and strategically important for Rome's expansion, saw Hannibal working to establish defensive lines against the Romans through negotiations and military strategies. However, these battles and negotiations were carried out by a commander who was now aged and weakened, far from his former prowess. The battles in Bithynia marked the final display of Hannibal's military genius. During this period, Hannibal attempted to create counter-defense lines by analyzing Roman military strategies deeply. However, the effects of age and health issues prevented him from fully reflecting his former strength and strategic brilliance. These battles illustrated a great commander, once shaking Rome, now fighting defenseless and alone. Ultimately, Hannibal's final battles in Bithynia reflected a period where he struggled to maintain his military genius while also facing fatigue and aging. It was clear that Hannibal was nearing the end of his life, and the battles concluded with a significant tragedy. Hannibal's death was seen as a great loss on the historical stage. His death marked not only the end of a military genius, but also signaled the weakening of resistance against Rome in Europe. With Hannibal's death, the strength of anti-Roman movements diminished, and Rome's dominance was further solidified. Hannibal's legacy left a deep imprint on history, extending beyond wars and strategies. His tactics and military intelligence became an inspiration for subsequent military strategies. However, the negotiations and battles Hannibal experienced in his final years may have overshadowed his legacy somewhat. After Hannibal's death, the anti-Roman movements he championed continued for a time, but his absence limited their impact. Rome's expansion and dominance further solidified in his absence. My dear friends, Hannibal's final battles in Bithynia and his death are crucial for understanding the last phases of a great military genius's life and legacy. Hannibal's life and struggles profoundly impacted Rome's military history and strategic development. His story offers a narrative reflecting both the victories and defeats of a military genius in the depths of history. Hannibal's wars and negotiations are an essential part of our history, and his life story encompasses significant events shaping a large portion of history. The life of Hannibal, once one of Rome's greatest enemies, left a legacy that reverberates in the depths of history beyond his military genius and strategic acumen. Dear friends, we have embarked on an unforgettable journey through the depths of time. We have shared many unknown aspects of the life and military genius of one of history's heroes, Hannibal. Now, we have reached the end of this journey. Hannibal's story is not limited to battles and strategies. It is also shaped by courage, determination, and the deepest aspects of the human spirit. Carthage's great commander made such a profound impact that it shook the very foundations of Rome. His battles formed one of the most compelling narratives not only in military history but also in human history. This great strategist, who once crossed the Alps to challenge Rome, inscribed his name in golden letters in the pages of history. The struggles, strategies, victories, and defeats experienced by Hannibal have become a legend echoing through the depths of history. He is remembered not only as a soldier but also as a leader, a visionary, and a fighter. His struggle against Rome showcased not only his military abilities but also his perseverance and determination. Throughout this journey, we have examined the significant milestones in Hannibal's life, his strategic genius, and the impacts that shaped history. However, as with every great hero's story, his life ended with a conclusion. Hannibal's legacy encompasses much more than the wars he fought and the dramas he lived through. As a significant part of history, He demonstrated the power and resilience of the human spirit beyond the realm of war and strategy. Now we experience the tranquility of bringing this grand story, lived centuries ago, into our own era. What we have learned about Hannibal's legend inspires us not only in the dusty pages of history books, but also in our daily lives. His perseverance, strategic intelligence, and bravery offer us a significant lesson. No matter how great the challenges, we can overcome every obstacle with determination and resolve. Dear friends, thank you for joining us on this exhilarating journey. Sharing this great story from the depths of history and tracing the footprints of past heroes has been a great pleasure for us all. Until our next historical exploration, we will continue to get lost in the depths of history and discover new tales. History not only tells us about the past, it also offers hopes and inspirations for the future. Hannibal's story reminds us of the importance of dreaming big and facing challenges courageously. Continue to explore the life of this great hero, as history always offers new discoveries and inspirations. See you in the next story, dear friends. Continue to journey in the light of history, and always stay full of great dreams.